In a cozy nook beneath the roots of an old maple tree, Brian the mouse lived in a snug little burrow lined with acorns, books, and button furniture. He loved his peaceful life, but sometimes he wished for more giggles and friends. Every morning, Brian peeked outside to check the weather and sniff the wind. One spring morning, he caught a strange, sweet scent drifting through the air, something he'd never smelled before. His whiskers twitched with curiosity. Brian packed a tiny satchel with cheese cubes and a notebook, tied his scarf tight, and tiptoed out into the bright morning light. He was determined to follow the scent and find its source, no matter how far he had to wander. As he padded through tall grass and wildflowers, Brian spotted a trail of colorful petals that shimmered like confetti. The scent was stronger here, and he knew he was getting close to something marvelous. Around a bend in the path, Brian discovered a hidden clearing glowing with sunlight. In the center stood a sprawling garden filled with the strangest flowers he'd ever seen. Some shaped like bells, others like stars, and all giggling softly in the breeze. Brian tiptoed into the giggle garden, as he decided to call it. Every step he took made the flowers chuckle and chime. It was impossible not to smile. He danced in the sunlight, and the petals shimmered with laughter. A large bloom with curly purple petals whispered, "You're the first visitor in ages, Brian." He blinked in surprise. The flowers could talk. They introduced themselves one by one, Petalina, Snortleblossom, and Chuckleweed among them. Brian felt shy at first, but the flowers' silly names and even sillier jokes made him laugh until he rolled on the ground. For the first time in a long time, he felt like he belonged somewhere truly special. He spent the whole day learning about each flower's favorite joke and helping to water their roots. In return, they told him the history of the Giggle Garden, planted by a joyful squirrel long ago who believed laughter grew best in sunlight. As the sun began to dip, the garden glowed with golden light, and the flowers sang a tune that made Brian's heart feel light and fizzy, like lemonade. He knew he wanted to come back, but first, he had an idea. The next morning, Brian raced home and rummaged through his drawers. He pulled out thread, paper scraps, and his storytelling hat. He was going to throw the garden a surprise party to thank them for their kindness. He returned a few days later, dragging a tiny cart filled with handmade invitations, paper lanterns, and a miniature cheesecake. The flowers gasped with delight. Or maybe that was just the wind. As twilight painted the sky pink and purple, Brian hung his lanterns between flower stems, and the garden lit up like a festival. The flowers wiggled in excitement as they waited for his big surprise. Brian cleared his throat, adjusted his hat, and began telling stories. Stories about his home, about dancing in the rain, and about the time he got stuck in a teacup. The flowers burst into peals of laughter. Chuckleweed laughed so hard he dropped a petal. Snortleblossom snorted juice from her stem. Even Petalina giggled daintily behind a leafy fan. Brian glowed with happiness, knowing his stories brought joy. As the stars peeked through the sky, the flowers began to hum a lullaby. Brian curled up on a bed of moss beside them, listening to their voices rise and fall like waves. It felt like he was part of something magical. The next morning, Brian awoke to find a new flower blooming near the garden's edge. It had tiny ears just like his, and was the color of his favorite scarf. The flowers said it was called the Brian Bloom, a gift for a true friend. Brian teared up as he hugged each bloom goodbye. He promised to return every week with new jokes and stories. He didn't feel lonely anymore. He had found friends, unusual ones, but friends all the same. Back in his burrow, Brian started a journal titled Adventures in the Giggle Garden. Each entry began with a joke and ended with a drawing of his flowery friends. His home felt fuller now, bursting with laughter. Word of the garden spread among the forest creatures, but only those who truly needed a laugh could find it. Brian was always there to greet them, scarf blowing in the breeze, ready to share a smile. Over time, the Giggle Garden grew larger, as laughter drew in sunlight and warmth. Brian became its guardian, storyteller, and best friend, a little mouse with a big heart and an endless supply of joy. When it rained, Brian taught the flowers to dance in puddles. When it snowed, he warmed them with tales told beside pine-cone fires. The garden became a place of every season, always blooming with delight. Even when Brian grew older, his stories never did. They stayed fresh and silly, like wild raspberries, and every visitor left with a giggle tucked behind their ear, a memory of the mouse who made flowers laugh. And so the giggle garden thrived, tucked away in the forest's heart, where laughter bloomed louder than any storm, and at its center lived Brian the mouse, the happiest mouse in the world.